This is TWIS, This Week in Science, episode number 920, recorded on Wednesday, April 5th, 2023. It's the Blairs Animal Corner Spectacular! Hi, everybody! I'm Blair Basdrich, and today we will fill your head with T-Rexes with lips, MRIs, and dead spiders. But maybe not. But first...
Thanks to our amazing Patreon sponsors for their generous support of TWIS. You can become a part of the Patreon community at patreon.com/thisweekinscience.
Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. Dr. Kiki is running her very own science communication conference. Justin is Dr. Dad running his own sick ward. And while they are away, there's only one thing to do. That's give you a super block of Blair's Animal Corner tonight on This Week in Science, coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, Blair.
Good science to you, Brian. Hi, everybody. Happy day of science. Welcome to this week's episode of This Week in Science. Thanks for joining us. Things probably look a little different today, and that is because, as I mentioned in the disclaimer, Kiki and Justin both are not here today. As I said on social media, they're out of office. And so because of that, we're going to have a quick Blair's Animal Corner Spectacular. And I thought it would be extra fun if we had a special guest today.
Hey, I'm Brian Pagano.
Tell us about yourself.
Yes, I work in an emergency room in San Francisco. I'm mainly night shift, and so I spent most of the day sleeping, so I'm ready to go.
Yeah, it's just like Justin.
Yeah, I'm on his
it's
same
like
clock.
5 a.m. for him. It's basically 5 a.m. for you.
Yeah.
You also have you have experience as a paramedic.
Yes.
You've had, 15 years as a lifeguard?
Yeah. I can save a life. I can tell people to walk with the best of them.
Yes, there you go. No running. And so you have an interesting perspective from the medical side of things, and you actually brought us a story tonight, right?
I sure did, yeah.
What did you bring us
So
tonight?
I've got MRI on the go.
Very cool. As I mentioned, brought lots and lots of the Animal Corner, but before that, I have a quick story about talking plants. Can't forget them. And then I also have T-Rex lips, as I mentioned before. Go ahead, picture that in your mind's eye for a minute. And then I have magic for monkeys and some maybe dead, maybe not dead spiders. We'll get into all of it. But before we do that, before we jump into the show, I want to remind all of you that subscribing to TWIS as a podcast on your favorite podcast platform, on YouTube, anywhere that you enjoy us is a great way to support us. Those subscription numbers really help show the love and help support us in a bunch of different ways. Just that's how the internet works, right? So anyway, with that, I'm going to get into my short non-animal story to start things off. Brian, did you know that animals talk? Plants talk.
No, they don't. I've heard so many plants. I've never heard a word.
You never heard a word from any of them?
I talked to them. I never heard a word from them.
Yeah. No, that's actually a really interesting point because we know that plants, at least anecdotally, enjoy it when we talk to them, right? There's been lots of science experiments submitted to school science fairs about playing music for plants and how that's beneficial or not, depending on what kind you do. But so we know that there's some sort of sound exchange with plants. And we also know from previous studies we've talked about on the show that there's electrical signals that they can use to communicate with their roots. But it turns out that they actually make measurable sound. So this is from Tel Aviv University, and this is for the first time in the world where they have actually recorded and analyzed sounds emitted by plants. They say they sound like clicks, similar to the popping of popcorn, but they don't really know that for sure because they're higher than we can hear. So they're at about 40 to 80 kilohertz, which doesn't sound like that much, except I will remind everyone, humans can hear about 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. So that's very, very high in terms of what we can hear. So we definitely can't hear plants. They did a whole thing where they kind of slowed it down and remixed the audio so that you could kind of hear what it sounds like, and it really just does sound like popping of popcorn, or almost like crackling on a vinyl, I would say.
Yeah.
I played it for you earlier, right? So
it sounded like that.
Yeah, it's not. The video had backing music on it, so I feel like that also didn't help. That's why I'm not playing it now. But it really just sounds like pop, 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 pop. But that means something to the plants, and so they found that they emit sounds more when they're under stress, and that also each individual species of plant emits sounds differently. And so they actually had an AI listen to these plants and their different types of sound. And the AI was able to distinguish between not only the species of plant, but what they were trying to say. Let me explain.
Please.
Before they placed these plants in an acoustic box to measure these sounds, they subjected them to various treatments. This is where it gets kind of sad.
Oh, man. Always.
Listen, science is pain sometimes. So some plants had not been watered for 5 days. They were just saying, I'm so thirsty. In some, they had cut the stem. And in some, they were untouched. They were totally content. So they wanted to see if they emit sounds in certain situations, what they mean, all these sorts of things. Unstressed plants emitted less than 1 sound per hour on average, but both dehydrated and injured emitted dozens of sounds every hour. So were they screaming?
They were screaming. They were certainly screaming. Good thing we can't hear them.
Oh my God. Well, here's the bad news. You know who can hear at these kilohertz? Bats, mice, insects, other animals. So the forest is full of plants screaming,
Yeah.
I guess.
Well, maybe not normally. They're chilling probably most part, right?
I don't know. Think about how many are being eaten in any one given moment.
Yeah, okay. So a lot of that then.
Like, can the deer hear the leaf scream as it takes a bite?
This sounds like the makings of a haiku for sure. And then the question is for Venus flytraps, are they like nom, 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 when they're eating? Like, can the insect hear them like munching down?
I love the idea of not only stress sounds but content sounds.
Yeah,
from
like
all plants. Yummy. That's amazing. But yeah, so this is the first time that that the acoustics of a sound emitted by a plant has been recorded, and not only that, but has been quantified and kind of measured and associated with specific states. I'm not going to say emotions or feelings or. Someone in the chat room wants to know how you would rate a screaming plant on a pain scale in the ER.
I guess it depends on how audible, right?
Yeah.
I guess not at all because I can't hear it.
Right, it's fine.
It should be okay.
Yes, it's that question. If a plant is screaming but you
Yeah.
can't hear it, is it in pain?
Yeah. Yeah. Probably 10 out of 10 of them if it's getting like eaten.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so next time you're pruning your plants, just consider the bats, I guess.
Like, listen for the scream.
Anyway, so so plants can talk. Add it to the list of things that, just tell your vegetarian friends, those plants, they screamed when they got picked.
Yeah.
There you go. Brian, tell me about MRIs.
Okay, so we have Bonn University did the world's first MRI study of children receiving ECMO therapy. So ECMO therapy is, of course, as you guys all know, extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. Basically, they are taking, if I understand correctly, they're taking blood out of a pediatric patient, removing CO2 and replacing it with oxygen, and bopping it right back in to this patient. Sort of like dialysis in a way.
How is it like dialysis?
So
remind us for who are not super familiar with how dialysis works.
So dialysis, the way dialysis works, your kidneys, for the most part, no longer function as efficiently or not at all as they used to. And so for upwards of 4 hours a day, almost every other day, you have to go in, get your blood basically filtered out of your body, put back in to remove, all your wastes that you produce that you normally pee out. So that's dialysis. This
Okay,
is
and so
similar to that.
how is this like that?
This is similar to that in that they're removing blood, and instead of removing waste from your body's processes, they're removing waste from your respiratory processes,
Which is
the carbon dioxide.
Carbon
Yeah,
dioxide. Got
carbon dioxide, and replacing it with oxygen.
I got it. So extracorporeal, outside of the body.
Right. Yeah.
And
just
then
like- yeah.
oxygenation.
Mhm.
Got it. It's right
Yep.
there in the
It's
name.
right.
Duh.
Break it down.
Okay, so who needs ECMO?
So patients with heart and lung failure, or in this case with pediatric patients developing heart and lungs that maybe can't support themselves. So
like
this-
preemies? Is that?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
One of the patients they did this procedure on was 450 grams, which is about a pound. So really early
small.
on, early kiddos. So the good thing about this is it allows for the heart and lungs to develop to rest while basically you're bypassing both heart and lung to oxygenate the rest of the tissue, right? So brain, all the other organs, every other organ, and it allows the heart and lungs to kind of relax and recuperate, we'll say.
And so this study is not about ECMO, though.
No, this study is. Yeah, that's a
that
big
is all
old
important
divergent.
to understand
Yes,
to understand the study. But what is this study actually
So
about?
this part, ECMO, as it sounds, it's pretty invasive, and it's a very sensitive procedure. So basically, with adults, I guess they put in like a catheter to remove and replace the blood in their groin area. With children, with pediatric children this small, they have to go for the neck. The problem with that is kids are very tiny, very hard. It's a lot more difficult to secure basically placement of a tube. So they can't really be moved too much is the idea. Any movement has to be very minimal. The idea of taking them to an MRI, which I'm not sure how many of the listeners have actually been to an MRI or anything, sort of claustrophobic, definitely a situation where you have to remove yourself from whatever comfortable bed, hospital bed, whatever comfortable bed you're on. You have to go onto a table, into a tube, very disruptive to one of these patients, basically, is the idea.
So, okay, so like when you take a patient to the MRI, which you probably do a lot.
I do, yep.
Even if they are spending time in bed, you usually put them in a wheelchair or gurney them up like
either one,
multiple floors. Like they have to go to a completely different area of the hospital.
Correct. Yeah, they have to go to like the radiology wing and
you get
MRI.
them out of whatever that is, and then put them into the MRI.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So they have to be replaced. They have to be moved, transferred from bed or wheelchair onto a table where they basically can't stay still. The further issue with MRI is it's magnetic. So unlike X-ray and CT, CAT scan, they all use radiation. This uses magnetic field and radio waves to capture an image. That being said, there really can't be any metal or anything like that near a patient in an actual MRI room. So it's like a suite, basically. It's a huge area that's kind of cloistered away. And obviously this patient has a lot of metal connected to them. So
interesting.
It's really, it would be even harder to have MRI safe equipment go into an MRI room, which there's like levels that even like as a not an MRI tech, I cannot go past certain levels. Because MRI, for example, if you had shrapnel in your body, MRI would rip it right out. Like the magnet is so strong, it would
So a needle, not good.
Not good.
Okay.
Yeah, not good. Luckily, I think with this, the catheters are most likely plastic, which we'll go in even more behind baseball on this.
Right.
Most of the time, when you get like an IV placed, they use a metal needle to establish the IV. Then they remove that needle, and all that's left is a flexible piece of plastic.
I didn't know that.
So that's why you can bend your arm; it won't tear your arm.
I had no idea.
Yeah, so there's no. Ideally, there isn't much in the way of metal as far as like catheters and stuff. But this is a whole. It's a lot more intensive.
Yeah,
exactly.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what they did with these ECMO patients who needed an MRI.
Yes, they brought this MRI. They brought a portable MRI to them So they have a smaller MRI unit that has basically the whole thing is mobile. It has a like a whole, basically what I was talking about, how it's, different levels. It has smaller version of different levels, so metal can't be in certain points. And it allowed them to transfer a patient over minimally to allow them to get an MRI.
Okay.
The reason they have to get an MRI in this is, unfortunately, one of the downsides with getting this ECMO therapy is they have to thin the patient's blood. That could lead to bleeding in other organs like brain. It could lead like bleeding in the stomach and stuff. And the reason they need to get an MRI is because it's a lot more, especially with a smaller patient. It's a lot more detailed. It's a lot more a way better detailed image. For example, an X-ray, just think of it like taking a picture. So it just takes a picture of a cross section of your body. A CT is multiple pictures. So it's basically multiple cross sections that you can then cut through, and you can see basically from nose to back of the head if you're doing a CT scan of the head, for example, and then it cuts through. An MRI gets basically an overall image using, so it's instead of just one photo or multiple photos, it's taking an overall image using basically magnetic resonance and like radio waves. So that's why they need that. They can get a better idea of if there's any hemorrhaging going on in the brain or any other organs, and treat that faster, so you don't end up giving a little baby a stroke, basically.
Oh God.
Yeah.
So in this study, this was the first of its kind where they did a mobile MRI on ECMO patients.
Yeah.
And so what did they find?
So let's see. Let's go through here. So it's necessary for the sensitive groups. So they did initially on the first four ECMO patients, and it was successful. And then since 25 children have been scanned in mobile MRI at this university, the youngest weighing 450 grams, about a pound. The oldest already 10 years old. Mobile MRI was used for routine examinations and further diagnosis after asphyxia, so lack of oxygen. And a comparison image was taken permanently installed normal field MRI at UKB. So basically, they're going to have this as like a solid thing. They're going to continue using it,
right?
Basically.
And so they compared it to normal MRI imaging, and it was sufficient.
Yes,
basically.
yeah. And they were able to catch some things that they may have missed having not gone to MRI.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, do you have a mobile MRI at your hospital?
No. Yeah.
Do you think you might someday?
I don't know, honestly. It seems, because we are a cardiac and stroke center. I don't know if a mobile MRI would be appropriate. I don't know if we would need that.
Right. So this is specifically looking at ECMO patients, these very specific situations, but I'm sure that as mobile MRI gets better and there's more and more studies with it, that they'll find more and more applications for it.
Yeah.
And like, can you imagine other situations where a mobile MRI would be really helpful? I
mean, anything where you really wouldn't be able to move a patient too much, like any severe spinal injuries,
right,
could be potentially. And yeah, I mean, patients that are on multiple medications and ventilations, maybe that can't, like I said, you can't take all that equipment to an MRI machine because there's so much metal involved.
Cool.
So yeah, a mobile MRI for like heads and stuff like that could be extremely useful to not have to basically remove a patient from what's keeping them alive and like risk taking them down to whatever department, however far away it is from your department. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for bringing this story.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I can't wait to hear more about mobile MRIs as things develop. That's very cool. All right, everybody. Well, thanks everyone for watching so far. We still have some Blairs Animal Corner to have next, and I'm going to cue up the band.
Strike up the band.
It's time for Blairs Animal Corner.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. You want to hear about animals? She's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels. There's Animal Corner.
you know what to say?
Give us the goods, Blair.
I will take it. Great. So I have so much Animal Corner. I hope you're ready for this.
Oof,
I mean,
glad I'm sitting-
I realize you live in the Animal Corner.
Yeah,
so
all the
this-
corners.
yeah, this is no different. Well, I want to start with a real quick story about T-Rex lip. But T-Rexes don't have lips, you say? Well,
Says who?
I have some breaking news for you. Contrary to more than a century of scientific and popular depiction, the large teeth of T-Rex and other toothy theropod dinosaurs were likely covered by thin, scaly lips when their mouth was closed.
So kissable.
So, like, you always see the pictures, or their teeth are bared. It's very similar to how you see crocodile or alligator mouths, where the teeth are just out all the time. Honestly, that probably started as just like, oh, this will look cool.
Yeah. Why would they have lips?
Yeah, but also because the teeth are so big. So there was this expectation that because the teeth are so big, they wouldn't possibly have all this extra scale and skin and sinew to cover. But a recent study has looked at a bunch of pieces of the anatomy of a T-Rex head to kind of see if it would make sense if he would have lips or not. This is important science. So if they were constantly exposed, there would be more tooth damage, desiccation, and wear. Desiccation, drying out, right? Because you don't have the saliva constantly being trapped by the lips. Anyway, they looked at the relationship between skull length and tooth size for theropod dinosaurs and living and extinct reptiles. Toothed reptiles. They performed a comparative analysis of tooth wear patterns for tyrannosaurids and crocodilians. What they found was theropod teeth lacked any evidence of outer surface wear. So they were like super clean, despite the fact that we know now that T-Rexes were not only carnivores, but probably scavengers. So they were crunching on a lot of bones. So like they were doing a lot. But they didn't show any surface wear of them just being out in the sun all the time. And then they also did not find the oral secretions you would need to keep them hydrated and protected if they were open all the time. So like crocodiles have extra juice, basically.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. I'm like, crocodiles are doing it. So why couldn't they?
Yeah, so they have the extra juice that helps keep their teeth nice.
A good tooth juice. Mm-hmm.
Tooth juice, exactly. And then also, based on the size of the teeth and the skull and everything else, it looked more similar to a Komodo dragon, which has a closed mouth. So all of that to say, it really looks like theropod dinosaurs such as T-Rex had teeth completely covered by labial scales, lips, when the mouth was closed. And this has implications, of course, on our understanding of dinosaur dental anatomy, for all those dinosaur dentists out there, for feeding ecology. So we know how their teeth work, how their teeth were maintained, how tooth decay might impact their lifespan, like all these sorts of things, and biomechanics, but of course also dinosaur portrayals. So, Brian, I know you like to draw.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Would you draw me a lipped dinosaur,
With
please?
some kissable lips. Yes, I think I could.
So that is your task.
Mm-hmm.
Please, tonight, well, if you have any downtime in the ER, draw me a dinosaur
We'll
with
see.
some lips, and I'll put it on Twitter.
Got it. You got it.
But
Lips,
so
yeah.
I just had to mention that because it is kind of an earth-shattering discovery for how we see dinosaurs portrayed. What I'm curious about is whether they'll actually start doing this, or if they're gonna just keep it the way it was because it looked cool.
Well, I kind of wonder too. Yeah, because like in a dinosaur museum, basically, you're going to add lips.
Right.
But then I'm starting to wonder how many works of like fiction have lipped dinosaurs. Like I feel like DreamWorks. If we watch one of the like, is DreamWorks Ice Age? Do they have lips in Ice Age?
Yeah. Right. Oh my God, great question. Here, I found an artist depiction, and of course, it has many pop-ups.
Yeah.
Give me a second. Open image.
They look.
That's what I want.
Yeah, let's bring that. That looks so much more sophisticated
than what you're picturing in your
Yes,
brain. Okay,
yeah.
so I'm gonna give everyone watching or listening time to imagine the ridiculous thing,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want to rob you of that for a moment, because that created some joy for me. But now I'm going to show you what it actually looks like. There we go.
This feels like Professor T-Rex. I feel like he should have.
Should have a pipe.
They should have glasses for sure. I feel like this is a thinking man's dinosaur.
It does just look like a lizard, though. Like, it is funny that we assumed that their teeth were always out, but like, if you look at current big lizards, most of them do not.
Yeah.
They have these. They have scaly lips, like a Komodo dragon. It's totally what it looks like. So anyway, oh yeah, and this picture has no feathers, so there's that whole conversation too. I almost hit leave studio instead of stop screen share.
I hope the feathers grow like a mustache or something.
Oh
That would be
man,
great.
that would be amazing.
Just Professor
okay,
Dinosaur.
so that's your second drawing.
Yeah,
you
for
have
sure.
to make me.
Yep.
Okay, first one, dinosaur with lips.
Mm-hmm.
Second one, dinosaur with lips with a feather mustache.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Okay, so that was our first animal corner. Next, I wanted to tell you about sleight of hand and how some monkeys are tricked by it and others are not. Now, if you had to guess, what about a monkey would tell you whether they would be tricked by a magic trick or not?
Their willingness to believe.
Right.
In
Their
magic,
sense of
I would say.
imagination.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Some people might guess it has to do with their intellect, like, oh, that dumb monkey's fooled very easily,
Right,
sort of thing.
right.
But in this study from University of Cambridge, it looks like it actually has to do with whether or not they have an opposable thumb.
Okay, yeah. Sure, I could. Mm-hmm.
Yes, let me explain. So they studied 3 species of monkey with a common sleight of hand trick called the French drop, which basically it's when you exchange something from one hand to the other, but you actually palm it with the original hand. So I have something, I'm not a magician, so I'm not going to do it with something real, but you have something, he's doing it on the screen right now, but you have something in one hand, like your left hand. You mime grabbing it with your right hand, but you instead let it drop into the palm of your left hand at the exact right moment. And so if I ask you which hand it's in, you're going to pick my right.
Right.
Because you thought you saw me grab it. And so a lot of palming magic tricks are based on the French drop.
The old switcheroo fake out. You've
Yes.
heard it 100 times.
And so they tested this on 3 different species of monkeys. They tested it on capuchins, squirrel monkeys, and marmosets. Now, capuchins were regularly fooled by the French drop, 81% of the time. They were, instead of a coin or something like that, they were tested with peanuts. And if they guessed the right hand, they got the treat.
Oh, that's nasty.
So the capuchins were fooled a lot. They mostly chose the empty second hand. Now, they have an extremely dexterous thumb. They are able to use what's called a precision grip. So they can waggle each finger and have opposable thumbs that allow them to kind of touch each finger individually, do all sorts of things manipulatively with their thumb.
Perform surgery, all of
Yes,
it.
yes, absolutely. So then squirrel monkeys, they were fooled 93% of the time. What's interesting about them, they were tested with dried mealworms. They're less dexterous than capuchins. So they have limited thumb rotation, but they can oppose their thumbs. So they can kind of like, it's like mitten almost. And so this suggests you don't have to be an expert in the movement to predict it. You just have to be physically capable of doing it, right? So they have the thumb. Marmosets, they don't have opposable thumbs. They have like a paw, basically. And they were tested with marshmallows. They were only taken in by the magic trick 6% of the time. They chose the hand in which it was initially in and stuck with it. So they didn't understand what the thumb was doing in the French drop.
Because they don't have, why would they? Yep.
Previous work with species that don't have hands at all, like birds, They make choices the same way marmosets do. They don't understand the French drum. The first thing I thought of, though, when I was reading this, our dog.
Oh, yeah.
Dogs are tricked by magic tricks all the time. Have you seen the internet?
Right. Yep.
But that has to be outside of this, because these are all wild animals. Dogs are domesticated, right?
Yeah.
They are used to seeing what our hands are doing, and they are very interested in what our hands are doing because
treats are in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're
Definitely.
domesticated. That's their whole thing, right? So much of what they do is more attuned to humans than even other dogs.
Right.
So I think they're an outlier, so we'll forget about them. But in theory, the kind of overarching theme here is that there is something in our neural motor system. There's already a theory that there's a mirroring between inherent physical capability and understanding of somebody else's movements in the same way, like the same part of your brain lights up if you watch somebody do something versus when you're doing it. So understanding all that, there's this idea that perception, is impacted by physical capability.
Yep.
So basically, because the marmosets didn't have an opposable thumb, they didn't understand what this movement was when they were grabbing the marshmallow. So they're like, what are you talking about? It's in the hand that you put it in. So obviously this has a pretty big impact on the way we study other animals, because again, if we are expecting them to comprehend something that we are doing and they don't have the same physicality that we do, that might not be a one-to-one. So if we're doing psychology tests or anything like that on animals, that's something to keep in mind. But it also just is a good thing to start looking at to explore the brain some more, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it is really interesting thinking about that standpoint, because even talking about our pup, like I feel like as, I don't know, humans, I guess we keep looking so hard at trying to make them understand what we're saying.
Yes.
And it's like almost like forcing the point with, treats and positive reinforcement, but it's like, if they don't, it's such an uphill battle if they don't understand what we're talking about from the get-go. Like they're not on the same, we're assuming they somehow are on the same page with us. So this is really interesting.
And to your point, we don't have tails.
Right.
We don't have the same vocal cords that dogs do. And so we can't mirror their physicality. So do we have trouble understanding what they're doing because we don't have the same biology they do either?
Right.
Yeah. So it's an interesting way to kind of warp your brain, thinking about how everything is subjective, and even in this way.
Yeah.
Right. Is that like, if you could even get super meta into it and be like, well, if I have different abilities than you, maybe I can't understand what's going on in your brain at this moment.
Well, I feel like to some degree that's true with humans, right?
Yes.
Like that's a really good point. Like everyone processes things way differently. So like approaching it with a different, like, this is why you don't understand this skill, the way, like it's different way people learn, right? Like visual, and that's interesting. That's really cool.
So it's, I don't know. It's there's lots of places your brain could go with this that could keep you up at night. All right, are you ready for more?
Oh yeah.
Do you want parakeets or spiders?
Do
the spiders? Okay. Brian got a preview of this last night and did not appreciate this story. So some female spiders pretend to be dead, so potential male partners won't fear being eaten. So on the surface, this headline explains itself.
Yeah.
We know that there's lots of female spiders who eat the male after they get what they want.
Good.
Instead of eat the rich, eat the male.
Yeah, eat the male. Fine.
But the problem is, if the males get hip to that, then why do they come back? I mean, there's a biological drive. They still are compelled to do so. But if there's one female that looks safer than another, which for some reason means the dead one, which doesn't make a lot of, I don't know. That one's harder for me because, like, let me just report on the story and then I'll get into it. So, a team of bioscientists affiliated with several institutions in China, working with a colleague from Australia, because that's where the spiders are from, of course, found that some females of funnel spiders, some female funnel spiders play dead to attract male sexual partners. So they collected several specimens of Aterigena aculeata and tested their behavior in the lab. Funnel weaving spiders are exactly what they sound like. They spin webs in the shape of a funnel. And those species in Australia of funnel weaving spiders are very dangerous. Shock. Of course, Australia.
Yeah.
Without treatment, they can cause severe pain and actually kill you. So they are very dangerous.
Very deadly, yeah.
They're known to engage in sexual cannibalism, as we just discussed. And so they also found that the females, they have sexual catalepsy, which means playing dead during the mating process, which I guess is a thing that other animals do. I got to look into it now. I'm very curious. But what they wanted to see was whether the female's death-like state was controlled by the female herself, or if the male was influencing it via hormones or something else. And so they did a series of experiments. In the first, they were allowed to mate naturally. In the second, they shaked her in a tube before allowing the pair to mate. And in the third, they put the female in a death-like state artificially using an anesthetic. Here's the part Brian really doesn't like. After the experiments, all of them were frozen and ground up, allowing researchers to study their chemical states.
Just, like, why? Like, I get, this study's cool. It's you get to learn about you're gonna grind them up. It's too extreme. Too extreme for me.
I feel like that's censored for Brian.
Yeah.
After that, they all went back outside and had fun.
And had a lot of fun. And it was great. They didn't get ground up.
But they wanted to know about the chemical states because they wanted to know if the male was influencing the female chemically.
Right.
So the male's not sending any signals. The females are doing it on purpose. They're putting themselves into a state, and they're only doing it for the males they deemed worthy. So they also get to kind of pick, like, I promise I won't eat you.
Right.
Come over here. You look like a very worthy male. They also discovered that they were very capable of controlling the duration of their state, and they were able to get up and walk away as soon as copulation was done. So not only were they able to control when they went down, they were able to control when they woke up. So
and then eat the guy, I guess.
Sometimes. My question is it a death-like state or is it a sleep-like state? Because, again, my question is, why would a male mate with a dead female?
Right.
That's not beneficial to him at all.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So,
and like, what? I wonder what even proximity. Like, does the male spider see the female croak? And
like she swoons, basically.
Yeah.
Oh!
Like, is it, because I know that, is it the dancing spider? Is that part of like a mating?
Oh, yeah, it could be like the jumping spider.
Yeah, oh, jumping, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is there like a dance that's involved?
Right.
Or they get the vapors?
No, that's a really good question. Is it a mating display?
Right. Like on the flip-flop.
Yeah, I agree. I think that this is way too surface level. That they like gave the judgment of it's like they are feigning death. End of story.
Yeah.
Like, I need more data to prove that it is not a sleep-like state, to prove that it is not a mating ritual, to prove that it is not like just her being chill, like I promise I won't eat you.
Right.
So I think they need to do a lot more research, but you know what that means.
More ground up spiders.
I know.
More powdered spiders.
That's the problem. The quest for knowledge
leaves a lot of corpses.
A lot of spider corpses.
This is interesting. Like, I guess adaptation, like sort of behavior too, right? Because if the male spiders are no longer into being eaten, their reproduction of the whole species is going to go.
Yes.
It's going to plummet.
Yes.
So like,
yeah,
it's weird that they chose to play dead instead of just don't eat the dude instead.
Yeah.
But then,
he's done his part.
We're figuring things out. We're still figuring things out.
The thing is, he did his job.
Yeah.
So, especially considering, I don't know if funnel web spiders do this, but remember that black widows, the males will sometimes break off their genitalia as a plug, which at that point, they have no reason to stay alive
just
because they
competition.
can't mate anymore.
Right. They're like food competition at that point.
Just peace out.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's
yeah.
it.
Thanks for your
Yeah.
contribution.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's very spider sex is so complicated.
Right.
I can't even. I have one more story.
Yes.
It's about monk parakeets. They are a parrot that is very loud and very competitive, and they live in complex social groups. This is from University of Cincinnati, and they wanted to look at essentially social displacement when birds disappear for a while and then come back.
Mhm.
So they wanted to see all about kind of the social dynamics of when a bird goes on a trip, perhaps into a researcher's laboratory and then returns to the wild. What does that do to the social dynamics? So they studied 3 groups of captive monk parakeets in 2021 and 2022. They wanted to see whether social history was critical in structuring how parakeets gained and maintained ranks. So, like, do you as a parakeet remember that I was top parakeet before I left is really the question.
Mm-hmm.
When I come back, does that matter? Is it relevant? Or is it like get in the back of the line?
Right.
So they identified each bird's status in their hierarchy by observing interactions and quantifying rank using networks of aggression. How'd they do that? They recorded 100,000 fights over 2 years.
Science.
And when they say fights, they're not knockdown drag out. They're displacement fights. So basically they just kind of like smack beaks together, yell at each other, squabble, and then eventually one leaves. And that's displacement. Is like, all right, you bullied me, I'm gonna go. And then
like,
the bird that stayed gained social standing.
They're like exiled? They had to go make it on their own?
No. It's more just like, hey, give me your seat.
Oh, okay. Got it.
It's bullying, basically.
Yeah.
And if you kind of faint, if you like let me take your seat, then I'm better than you.
Mm-hmm.
It's very simple. So typically an aggressor will come up, peck the other bird, then the bird flees, then okay, he won. Mm-hmm. Once hierarchy forms, it takes a little bit when a new group comes together. They then removed birds of different social standing for 8 days and then returned them to the flock. And then they recorded the fights. If they wanted to see if there was something about that bird that gave it high rank. Were they big? Were they more aggressive than other birds? Were they more colorful? Were they louder? Like, is there something that is being selected for that goes, that man's top dog, right?
Tattoos, scar over the eye.
Right.
Mustache.
Yeah, like a leather jacket.
Yep.
Absolutely. So that's the question. But what they found is there's really no measurement, size, any of these other things did not matter in their placement. It was force of will.
Willpower. That's the best power.
Just basically like who's the most incessant. Like who
Yeah.
who's like most determined, who's
Yes,
like not
yeah.
going to get displaced, right?
Cool.
So they found that it wasn't associated with anything measurable. So rank loss looks like it's more likely a result of a change in social history. Like, you weren't here, dude. I took your spot. Mm-hmm. So it's like a power vacuum. Everything shifts to accommodate the power vacuum as soon as a parakeet leaves. And then when they come back, there's no space for them. Nobody's willing to step aside and let them take their spot back.
Oh, shoot.
Which is really what's unusual. High-ranked birds had the hardest time reintegrating. It was like, you were top dog last week, but now we all hate you because you were a bully. Mm-hmm. Lower-ranked birds had a decline, but it was not as dramatic. Also because there was just less far to fall.
Yeah. Less expectations. Those are the good ones. I like those are the good ones.
There you go. I'm comfortable down here.
This is fine.
So this is interesting because, as I said, one, it's not a measurable thing about these individuals that make them top parakeet. It's really just who has won the most fights, displaced the most birds, and has been there to displace birds. And as soon as you're gone, you're history, man. Nobody cares about you anymore. Old news. Doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. So the reason this is important is because, as I mentioned at the beginning, animals are taken away from their social groups all the time for science experiments.
Science.
They're also taken away. Maybe they're injured and they go into rehab and then they're re-released. Maybe they're genetically important to a declining species. you pull them, you take some genetic information, or you enter them into a breeding program, then release them again. Like there's a million reasons that could happen. Also, if you maintain a captive population, you could potentially move animals around, pull one for an experiment, all these sorts of things if you maintain captive animals in a zoo, conservation organization, or in a lab. And so if you understand that specific species work this way, that can impact how you care for those animals. So the more you know about that, the better.
Yeah, how would you like, because then you'd have to isolate, because it wasn't, the top dogs weren't like keeping out the lower ranks, right? It was just the group as a whole.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you wouldn't even be able to isolate a couple to be like, oh, let's reintegrate. They'll be easy breezy.
Right.
It's like,
yeah,
man,
it's complicated.
You got to stage a fight that they can see with the puppet bird.
Yes,
and then
there
they're
you
like,
go.
oh, this cool guy is back. Bring him in.
Yeah, there you go. So all right, so those are all of my stories tonight. I hope that was enough animal corner for everybody. We do not have any more. That's it. It's a short story. It's a short show today. But we've done it. We've done the whole show. Hopefully you can't hear our dog in the background who's very upset. She is ready for this to be done. Thank you all for listening. I really hope you enjoyed the show. Shout outs to Fada for helping with social media, show notes, Gord for maintaining the chat room, Identity4 for recording the show, Rachel for all of the editing. Hopefully this wasn't too much this week. There's only one mic to worry about.
Yeah.
And of course, I'd like to thank our Patreon sponsors for their generous support. I, of course, do not have access to that list. So insert here, Kiki reading the list.
Thank you to Teresa Smith, James Schaefer, Richard Badge, Kent Northcote, Rick Loveman, Pierre Velazarb, John Ratnaswamy, Carl Kornfeld, Karen Tozy, Chris Wozniak, Dave Bunn, Vigard Shefstad, Hal Snyder, Donathan Stiles, a.k.a. Don Stylo, Ali Coffin, Reagan, Derek Schmidt, Don Mundus, Stephen Alberon, Daryl Myshak, Stu Pollock, Andrew Swanson, Fredas104, Sky Luke, Paul Ronovich, Kevin Reardon, Noodles, Jack, Brian Carrington, David E. Youngblood, Sean Clarence Lamb, John McKee, Greg Riley, Mark Hessenflow, Steve Leisman, a.k.a. Zima, Ken Hayes, Howard Tan, Christopher Rappin, Richard, Brendan Minish, Johnny Gridley, Clemmy Day, Flying Out, Christopher Dreyer, Artyom, Greg Briggs, John Atwood, Rudy Garcia, Dave Wilkinson, Rodney Lewis, Paul, Rick Ramus, Philip Shane, Kurt Larson, Craig Landon, Sue Doster, Jason Olds, Dave Neighbor, Eric Dapp, E.O., Adam Mishkan, Kevin Parachan, Aaron Luthen, Steve DeBell, Bob Calder, Marjorie, Paul D. Disney, David Simmerly, Patrick Pecoraro, and Tony Steele.
Round of applause to our Patreon supporters. We love you.
Yep.
Also, thank you, Brian.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah, it was so fun. I really appreciate not just talking to a wall, but also enjoying this science conversation with you. Like I said, we have these conversations, but they're not usually recorded. So I'd love to hear from all of you if you enjoyed this. You get a little peek into the behind the scenes in Blair's Animal Corner, aka our household. What it sounds like when we're geeking out about animals and science in the house. If you would like to support us on Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/thisweekinscience. On next week's show, Kiki will be back, Justin will be back. And when will they be back, Brian?
Yes. They will be back on Wednesday at 8 p.m., broadcasting live from your YouTube, Facebook channels, and from TWIS.org/live.
Hey, do you want to listen to us as a podcast? Perhaps while you draw a T-Rex with some delicious lips. Just search for This Week in Science where podcasts are found. If you enjoyed the show, get your friends to subscribe as well.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes, and links to stories, we will be available on their website, TWIS.org, and you can also sign up for their newsletter.
You can also contact us directly. Do you have contact information?
No. I'm off the grid completely.
So if you want to contact Brian, you'll just have to contact me. I will pass it along, I promise. You can contact Kiki and ask her how her conference went at Kirsten@thisweekinscience.com. You can contact Justin and ask him how his sick house is at twistminion@gmail.com. Or you can email me and tell me how much you like the show. Please don't tell me if you didn't. That's not helpful. Or you can send Brian your fan mail because he's so amazing at blairbaz@twis.org. Just be sure to put TWIS, TWIS, in the subject line, or your email will be spam filtered into a funnel spider web.
Where they're playing dead.
Yes.
or something.
Yeah.
You can also ping them on Twitter. They are TWIS Science, at Dr. Kiki, at Jacksonfly, and at Blairs Menagerie. We love your feedback, and if there's a topic you would like TWIS to cover or address, or a suggestion for an interview, please let them know.
We'll be back here next week, and we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
And if you've learned anything from the show, remember,
it's all in your head.
This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. This week in science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got one disclaimer, and it shouldn't be news, that what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just yet understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy. 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 And This Week in Science is coming your way. So everybody listen to everything we say. And if you use our method instead of rolling a die, we may rid the world of toxoplasma gondii. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 Got a laundry list of items I want to address, from stopping global hunger to dredging Loch Ness. I'm trying to promote more rational thought, and I'll try to answer any question you've got. But how can I ever see the changes I seek when I can only set up shop 1 hour a week? This Week in Science is coming your way. You better just listen to what we say. And if you've learned anything from the words that we've said, then please just remember it's all in your head. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in 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 Science.